Last time, we explored 4 surprisingly simple measures that researchers have linked to health, function, and longevity. But knowing what they are is only half the story. The more important question may be this: what do we do with that information once we have it?
We experience 1,000 waking minutes on average every day. How are you spending yours? I'm Dr. Wendy Bazilian, and you're listening to 1,000 Waking Minutes. I can't wait to connect with you here with practical ways to eat well, move daily, and be healthy, to optimize every waking minute you live for a happier, healthier life. Thank you for sharing some of your waking minutes with me today. Let's get started.
I'm saying yes to better days, yes. I'm on my way, yes. It's gonna be okay, yeah.
Hello, I'm Dr. Wendy Bazilian, and thank you for joining me here on 1,000 Waking Minutes. In our last episode, we explored 4 surprisingly simple measures that researchers have linked to health, function, and longevity. We talked about getting off the floor, standing on one leg, grip strength, and walking speed. We also discovered that each of these measures seem to be reflecting something larger about our health and about how we interact with our space. They represent and reflect participation, confidence, and reserve. How can that be? Well, the ability to keep moving through the world and engaging in things we care about requires us to call on different abilities within our body that come to act outside of the gym, outside of the fitness class. And one of the themes I shared in the last episode that had emerged from the research was how often these measures involve abilities that aren't typically the focus of our attention. We spend a lot of time talking about aerobic fitness, about resistance exercise, increasingly about flexibility, about heart health, exercise, all the things that matter tremendously. But many of the researchers that we discussed, and one in particular, have been interested in what, and this was Dr. Araujo from Brazil, interested in what he called non-aerobic aspects of fitness, things like strength and balance, mobility, flexibility, coordination, and the ability, again, to move our bodies through space and react, interacting all together, not uniquely focusing on only one, but how they interact. And those abilities show up everywhere. They show up when a child asks you to sit on the floor and play a game or read a book. They show up when you're carrying groceries to or from the car, or navigating a crowded airport, between gates with a tight connection, when you're working in the garden, when you're stepping off a curb, we talked about, even when you're climbing stairs in your own home, or just exploring a town or an area, when you're out in an adventure in your town or somewhere else. Last time, I encouraged you to pay attention where these abilities show up in your life, to see those occasions when, those would come in handy, maybe to train, or how good you maybe already are, because it's a good marker of health by testing these. Today, I'd like to take it just a step further. I'm going to talk about how we practice these, how we preserve them, and maybe most importantly, talking about how to approach them with curiosity and confidence, not like you're being ranked and graded or scored like they did in the research, but giving yourself a bit of grace along the way, that these are things that you can check yourself on, establish like where you're at today, and if there's room for improvement, work to improve them. And you can do this on your own, or you can work with a physical therapist, a certified exercise trainer, someone who can work with you. You can work with a partner as well. So let's put it into practice. We talked about the science in the last episode at some length and, all the places it shows up. And I want to put it into real life. I mentioned last time about my grandmother who could still get down on the floor and get right back up into her 80s. And I bring this up again because the moment people hear a story like that, they're like sort of like, wow. And they're often start comparing themselves internally. Can I do that? And I encourage you not to do that. I encourage you to be in awe, certainly, because she had a very active and she was very nimble and she practiced it, frankly. As I look back, I realized that it was through her practice, not in a fitness kind of way, but how she lived her life made her, almost required her to be able to do that on a daily basis. But we're all arriving at this conversation from a different place. We all have different histories, different bodies, different injuries and limitations, of course, and different experiences. So what matters today is not to compare yourself with someone else. It matters at understanding where you are today and thinking where you might like to be in a month, in a year, in 5 years, 10, maybe 20 years from now on this front. So before trying these, I want you to look around your environment in every case, give yourself some room, move coffee tables if you need to, roll up a rug, make sure that a dog isn't going to jump in, because you want to set yourself up for success for these. You don't want to absolutely challenge yourself right out the gate. You want to train yourself on some of these. So having a wall or a countertop or a sturdy chair or your spouse to lean onto if you're practicing balance, finding, like I said, a physical therapist or a friend or trainer who can be nearby or show you the proper moves. I'll go through some of them, but certainly verbally. And if you're watching, I'm not going to be doing them today, although maybe I should do that for some clips and videos to show. But something that makes you feel comfortable and safe, that's a good decision. That's not a sign of weakness. Safety first. The goal here is to learn something useful that research has shown has an impact on your long-term health. So let's start with the floor. I didn't say let's start with the score, even though the researchers scored the participants from a starting score of 10 on how many times they touched or moved or, used an arm or a leg or a knee or something else to get down and then get back up. We're starting with the floor. If you decide to try this, you need to give yourself some room. Make sure that the space around you is safe and comfortable and that you actually are near enough something that you can push up or engage in. Make sure you're not stepping over extra shoes that are around. And maybe you do have your shoes on or you have comfortable socks. There's no charging cords that you could trip into. And make sure that something's nearby that you can if you don't think you're going to be able to immediately do this or just because. Have a chair nearby, someone, a sofa, a cushion, something. That's totally reasonable. And simply pay attention and try to get yourself down to the ground. Now, the side note on this is if you do have limitations, you can do this into a chair because most of us are sitting into a chair. And you can use the chair as the first step. And the Centers for Disease Control actually have a really cool chair exercise that I'll mention briefly as well. And I mentioned in the last episode where it's a sit-rise test that you can do from a chair. But notice, how did you get down to the ground? And then notice, how do you get back up? So I would say the first attempt is just get down and get back up the way you normally do, if you normally do that. And just notice, what parts of your body engage? How many things do you touch? Do you lean your elbow? Do you push off your knee? Do you naturally place your hand on a floor? Do you pause halfway and think through what your next move is going to be? Some people sort of operate and they try one thing and they try the next, but they get themselves back up. Did you move confidently, more confidently maybe than you expected, or were you hesitant? So use curiosity first and start conservatively. It's the best place to start when you're practicing something like your mobility that engages, again, like strength and balance and coordination, all these things. So you're in a place where you have room to move. If balance is a concern, be sure to consider having another person nearby as well. You might even begin by sitting on the edge of a sofa. So I'm giving a lot of setups so that it's in your mind and you consider this. You can sit on the edge of a sofa and maybe lower yourself to the floor under control and then see what it feels like to get back up onto the sofa. Again, noticing. This is all about noticing. Do you naturally roll to one side? Do Do you use a hand? Do you reach for support? None of these is wrong. They're simply part of the information gathering. As your confidence grows, you can try moving all the way from standing to sitting on the floor and then returning to standing and seeing if you can reduce the amount of reliance you might have on furniture or other supports. This is about taking your time. There's no winner for speed, and noticing what feels easy and challenging along the way. So the goal is not to rush through this one. In fact, I'd encourage you to move slowly enough that you can notice what's happening along the way. Most people learn something even before they start thinking about how well they're doing it. And we are not trying to become experts at sitting on the floor, by the way. We're preserving our ability to participate in life. Think about that. And the floor just happens to be the place where several of these important capacities show up at the same time. Think about the child who invites you down to the floor and you say, well, no, come up here on the sofa. Maybe you start at the sofa and you get to where you can come down on the floor, or where your grandchild has the blocks spread out. And even before being invited, you're able to get yourself down on the floor because you're confident you can get back up and you can play blocks. Where stretching can become easier because the idea of getting down there to start your stretching routine is more comfortable. Or going to the beach doesn't seem like a lot of extras on how to figure out if you're going to carry the chair or how you're going to get there, or whether you're going to pass on it altogether because you worry about the sand being a little uneven and how will I get the towel down, me down to the towel and me back up off the towel. So this is really the reasoning behind why I don't think of this as a floor test per se, but simply a place where strength and mobility and flexibility, balance, all those things, coordination, a big one, you get a chance to introduce them to yourself again all at once. So I want to reiterate that if the floor doesn't feel like the right place to start, we never want to create pain or force through this. And that's where the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC's, it's called the 30-second chair test. I mean, on its own, it's great. You should do this anyway. But if the floor is more than you want to bite off at the beginning, the 30-second chair stand test is a good one. You sit in a sturdy chair and you see how many times you can stand up and sit back down in 30 seconds, whether you're assisted or not. But the goal is to do it without using your hands ultimately. And it asks a slightly different question, but many of the same qualities show up. So it's another great one. And let's face it, a lot of us are getting into cars and getting back out, sitting down in chairs and getting back out. And certainly if we want to do more of that NEAT that I've talked about in another episode, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, I want you getting up out of that chair even more frequently just to do ordinary movement throughout. So that is the floor rise test in short. There's more specifics on how to exactly do it, or, if you wanted to replicate the study and put your feet crossed and go down into a crisscross and rise back up. That is very challenging. I will admit, but the point is practicing getting down and getting back up, because sometimes life challenges us and puts us down and we still need to somehow get back up. So the next one that we talked about was balance. So let's talk about balance. And this is a really pretty cool and very simple test. Not always simple to do, but simple test to try and engage. It seems really straightforward, but it often reveals more than people expect. So here, for safety, what you want to do, and this is the one leg stand, and you want to try to do it for 10 seconds. That's basically what we're going to do on both legs, and see if you can balance unaided for 10 seconds. So first, for safety, you want to stand near your kitchen counter next to a wall, the back of a sturdy chair that doesn't slide, that you can reach to if you need. You might start with your hands on those surfaces, and then you're going to lift one foot slightly off the floor and try to hold it for 10 seconds. Feel what 10 seconds feels like. Maybe you count out the 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, or use a stopwatch, or just estimate. You can certainly count. But remember, this is a simple test that's generated a lot of interest among researchers. In the study I shared, the ability to stand on one leg for 10 seconds was associated with better long-term health outcomes. And 10 seconds may not seem very long. I mean, it isn't in the scheme of life, certainly, but it appears to tell us something meaningful about future health. And just like getting off of the floor turned out to be much more than about the floor, balance appears to be much more than just about standing still or doing that well. And what makes this so valuable is how quickly it gives us, feedback. It gives us information we can actually use. One side often feels different than the other. Some people are surprised how steady they feel. That's encouraging. Others notice a bit of instability that they weren't aware of. Maybe they thought that they were a little more steady on their feet than they are. But either way, you learn something that's useful right away. And again, before you start comparing yourself, to the result of your spouse, or, if you play pickleball, your pickleball partner, it's a good thing to do. It's sort of a good game warm up. Let's get our balance going. Or a teenager in your house that impresses you with their yoga poses. Remember, we're looking for your information. There's no winner here. It's about you. So balance is one of the abilities that supports us everywhere throughout the day. It helps us step off a curb. It helps us move from, the driveway to grass up to a step. It helps us recover from a misstep. It keeps a misstep from being a misstep or a stumble and not a fall. Even without thinking about it, our body catches us. So set yourself up well, stand by something stable, keep your fingertip nearby, or start with one on that surface. That may add confidence at the beginning. And remember, this isn't about proving anything. It's about observing where you are today and encouraging yourself to practice your way up till you can do it. Maybe you can do it more than 10 seconds, but the goal is 10 seconds. That's what the research showed is important. Balancing for 10 seconds. 2 seconds today, terrific. 2 seconds next week, great. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, moving your way up. Take your time, but train your balance. There are lots of ways you can do, formal balance training. Today, we're talking about these simple 4 that you can take at home. You can work on it even while you're brushing your teeth. In the in-between moments, it can be sometimes the beneficial ones, the ones where you align your behaviors together, and the moments add up. They stack up more than people realize, and they help us build awareness, control, and confidence in space. So if you feel unsteady today, this is not bad news. This is your starting place to get more balance in your life. And I mean physical balance, because it does improve with repetition. You'll see your nervous system adapts. You have different balance centers. We tend to rely more and more on our eyes as we get older, but our ears and also our proprioception, which is the nervous system communication throughout, those are parts of our balance centers. It's sort of a trio. And with consistent, simple practice, progress is something you can genuinely feel, and you can feel it pretty quickly. The next practice is about strength, but not at the gym and not how much, dead weight can you lift, but it's about grip strength of all things. And really what we talked about last episode and what it comes down to is sort of a measurement of our strength reserve in our body. Most of us don't spend our days wondering about our grip strength, unless you actually work with your hands, a mechanic or a musician, drummer, or a guitarist. But we definitely notice strength when life calls on it. When we are trying to lift a suitcase at the airport up onto the, even up onto the scale when we're checking in, let alone up into the overhead compartment. When we're lifting our groceries or sort of like a bigger package load that came from the warehouse store like Costco, you're trying to carry something that's a little awkward, but also a little bit heavy. When you're carrying things, I mentioned last time, carrying like a bag of potting soil. We were planting some things in some container gardens last weekend, and potting soil is notoriously challenging to carry because not only is it big, but it sort of shifts as you're carrying it. Or maybe, just grabbing your grandchild or your child when they come running at you and being able to not like brace yourself for your life or go, no, but, receive them with joy and be able to lift them and carry them. That's all signs of strength. Not all grip strength, but remember, we're talking about reserve. The research we discussed last week was about how lower grip strength was associated with higher risk of death from all causes. so that when grip strength goes down, because it's one of the earlier signs of decline and earlier signs of overall musculoskeletal health, which I just found so interesting. And this wasn't one study. There's increasing research looking at this. And it's sort of like a lowest hanging fruit. Like if you can measure one thing like grip strength as being sort of proxy for other things, and even relatively small differences between grip strength in one hand and the other between one person was associated with poorer long-term outcomes. And this is one reason why grip strength has become such an interesting area of study. But let's bring it into real life. If you're curious about your own grip strength, there are hand grip dynamometers, they're called, where on the YouTube version or the video version of this, I'm squeezing my hand. There's different tools that can measure and you can see what your grip strength is. There are ways to do it at a fitness center to measure. And there are simple grip trainers as well. There's therapy putty, there's stress balls, these hand grippers that sort of just have a coil with different difficulty levels depending on what color the handles are. And you just squeeze and release, squeeze and release. But I actually don't want to get too focused on the gadgets. That's not the first place to go. I'd rather have us pay attention to the places where strength shows up in our daily life. And we already have a few very simple gadgets at home that we can use. Think about the next time you're carrying groceries or lifting luggage or opening the jar or moving a box, hauling laundry upstairs. Notice what happens. Do the tasks feel comfortable? Are they challenging? How do your hands feel, your arms, your muscles? Do you avoid some of them altogether that you used to do? Do you naturally ask for or look for help on some of them? None of those answers to those questions that you might have is right or wrong. It's just information that I want you to pay attention to when you're engaging your strength in daily living. And the really encouraging side of this is that strength is remarkably trainable throughout life, even well into our 80s. We didn't necessarily think, it might take a little more work and more consistently, but you can train it and you can grow muscle. Used to be thought use it or lose it, or once you get to 30, it's all over. There were all these thoughts, but the matter of it really was that we weren't living long enough and people weren't researching, can it really happen? So there were a lot of assumptions that were made in early science just based on the reality of life expectancy and what we knew of people, at that time. But you don't have to become any kind of power lifter to give your muscles a reason to stay engaged. So you might do resistance training. I highly encourage it, topic for a whole nother day. But it might be for you the difference in doing some strength training that just helps you carry your own groceries in one trip versus two if you want to, or doing the things like gardening or lifting or pushing or pulling or helping people in a way that you're not questioning whether or how much you can do. You can do it again. So bringing curiosity into your everyday life, I think that's something I constantly encourage, but I encourage it here as well. For a tangible place to start, though, and this is gadget light, we don't need big fitness gadgets unless you're into them and you want to buy one more thing, but you can grab a tennis ball. If you have some of those stress balls, sometimes you get them at, if you go to conferences, you get a stress ball. You can even use a rolled up pair of socks this way, or stuff, some socks, and give it a firm squeeze. What you do when you're, sort of training your grip strength is you gradually tighten your grip. You hold for about 5 seconds. Sometimes I have you grip a little harder just for 1 or 2 seconds, because usually you can find a little more juice in there, and then slowly release again. Repeat that 5 times with each hand. Maybe you do a couple sets. You do it again a couple times. But even just 5 times, and go on your way. It's not a formal test. It's not a replacement for overall strength training, but it can help you become more aware of your grip. And you might be able to start building up some of that strength. Sometimes it's the first step in getting toward a strength training routine is doing things that are simple and sort of prove their point to you. And in noticing it and then engaging in small ways and seeing benefits and things that actually matter to you. It matters to some people, how much, dead weight you can lift over your head. But is that a real life thing that matters to you every day? Sometimes when you see that your capacity has increased by doing some strength training. That's really where you're like, oh, I see it. I get it. And strength becomes meaningful and showing up in your real life in that way. And it's what helps us continue doing the things we want and need to do in life with confidence and independence, and maintain that reserve for when we need it, because sometimes we need it, especially with age. But I would say any time in life, we need reserve to call on when we need it. The final one that I want to talk about of the 4 is walking. And we talked about this in the context of getting across the street before the light changes. And walking is so deeply embedded in daily life that most of us barely notice walking unless something gets in our way, frankly. And by gets in our way, it can be small things, but it can also be bigger things like a twisted ankle that stops you, or the curb that you go over that you missed and didn't see, or that airport terminal, and I can name a few, with such minimum time between connections, or the gates are just so far that it says 15 minutes between this terminal and that one, or this gate and that one. It can also show up in how your feet feel after a day that you spent, out exploring, that maybe didn't feel the same if you had done it years before. And or if you forgot to break in newest shoes, which on occasion, you go for the trip, you get the new shoes, and maybe when you were younger, it didn't hurt so much. But if you try it when you get a little bit older, boy, you see the value of breaking in those shoes. I've certainly been there. I imagine some of you have been as well. Suddenly that thing that feels so automatic it shows up, and it's really worth paying attention to. As you put that one into practice, you start somewhere safe and familiar, and that's really important. I don't want you to test yourself in the real live busy streets on how quickly you can get across a street while the light is flashing. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But choose like a long hallway. If you have a hallway somewhere you work or in your home, maybe there's a quiet sidewalk or a grassy area in a local park. School track is a great place to do it because it's usually the upkeep. It's kept up so that it's level, and there's not going to be potholes and little groundhog holes or anything that you might find yourself navigating into if you're not paying enough attention. But any level surface can work well. And this isn't about sprinting or racing, seeing how fast you can go, but paying attention to how walking feels itself rather than worrying about the stopwatch, but also what your pace and gait feel like and look like. So I want you to notice your pace. Notice your confidence going across that space. Notice whether you move comfortably and continuously, or whether you're working harder than you expected. Sometimes as time goes by, it's a good baseline because then you can really sort of register where you are now in time. But you expect that you're doing the same as you did before because you've never really, thought to pay attention to it. So you might even try this when walking with a friend. Can you carry on a conversation comfortably with that friend while keeping a pace, or keeping a pace that starts slightly faster than your normal pace? Can you walk farther than usual? Or can you pick up the pace briefly? A friend of mine who was training in her neighborhood and was in her 80s, I don't know if she still does this or not. She's a bit more senior than 80s now, but she used to train, she had a trainer, and she would train between telephone poles. And they would do literal training on pace and walking and gait speed between telephone poles. And so training your pace can be about picking it up a little for a duration and then settling back into your normal rhythm. How's your breathing? And what I find so interesting about walking speed is that it starts to then show up in places where you're not really thinking about fitness at all. It really is. It comes down to the flight connections we're making or crossing the street when the light is flashing. It's last minute things that you have to get to. It's keeping up with friends, when you're on a walk, or when you're wandering around, a museum, maybe with a friend, or strolling a farmer's market, without constantly looking for maybe the place to sit down. It's things like that this training can really help you for, but it trains you even for far more. It really helps you keep up with life. And maybe that's why this research has really stayed with me. I shared in the last episode that I heard this once. I heard about this research about, testing the speed where individuals over the age of 50 and into their 60s, different studies looked at whether they could get across the crosswalk in the time that was engineered on the sign. And it just changed my thinking for some reason. It woke me up to something I just really hadn't considered before. And now it's part of just what I think, I see it everywhere. And the bigger piece is whether we're able to move through the world at the pace that allows us to participate in it, in the experience that we want to, in what we call our well-lived life. I think of, going to the zoo with my daughter or with your child or grandchildren or just others, keeping up with individuals at home that are running around, saying yes to the one more block or one more exhibit or one more thing on the day. So in many ways, walking speed really is simply like mobility meeting up with opportunity, sort of poetic there. Mobility meeting up with opportunity. Yeah, I think that's about right. And it reflects how comfortably we can move through the world and participate in the experiences available to us and that we want to participate in. So with all that in mind, when I started preparing for this episode, these two episodes in tandem, I originally thought I would like to talk about 4 separate measures. I thought they were all fascinating and unto themselves, and there were things that we could do in our daily life. And I knew they were trainable. So I'd read the research, getting off the floor, sitting and rising, both really, standing on one leg, grip strength, which I thought was sort of the odd man out, but I came to really love what it represented, and walking speed. And I thought about that. But the more I sort of chewed on this, the more they seem to be asking sort of the same question from different angles and different directions. It's about participation in life. I feel like it's about the things that are fitness, keep us fit, and it's about fitness beyond aerobic and resistance exercise. And getting off the floor turned out to be participation in life. Playing with your kids with the blocks, or getting down to read, or simply getting down and getting back up, period. Balance is about confidence, walking across that sort of non-pliant, bumpy space and knowing you can do it, and knowing that you can hold those 10 seconds eventually if you're not there yet. Strength is not just about strength in this moment, this one lift, but it's about the reserve that you have that you can call on when you need it. And walking is really about keeping up in life. And the encouraging part, again, is that none of these is a fixed ability. They're all trainable, and there's no evidence that you can't train them at any point in your life. They respond to practice. They respond to use, and they are the connectivity, the conversation, the relationship of our body internally to ourselves. They're our physical self, and lots of things going on, which is so cool. So I hope over the next week and months, years maybe, that you are paying attention to these things. Sit on the floor. These are things you do every day. Sit into a chair and get back up. Stand on one foot when your coffee is brewing in the morning. Grab the tennis ball or the sock, after you fold it. Grab it, tighten it, and do some grip strength. And definitely get out there and take a walk, noticing and doing. And that's what I think the real value of these measures. So I think that research is so cool. I love when scientists really dive into practical things. Sometimes they come out with findings that are revelations. Sometimes they're ordinary. Sometimes they're like, well, that just makes sense. So I think that these can teach us and help be part of the bigger picture of the relationship between our bodies and the lives that we're trying to live in here and live well. Thank you for sharing some of your waking minutes with me today. I'm Wendy Bazilian, your host and friend here at 1000 Waking Minutes. And until next time, be well.
Thank you for tuning in to 1000 Waking Minutes. A huge thank you to our amazing collaborators, including our production and marketing teams, and Gabriela Escalante in particular. To the ultra-talented Beza for my theme music, my lifelong friend and artist, Pearl Price Photography and Design, to Danielle Ballantyne, Jen Nguyen, Joanna Powell, and of course my family, and everyone working tirelessly behind the scenes. And to you, our valued listeners, I so appreciate your support. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving a comment, writing a review, and giving 1000 Waking Minutes, that's us, a 5-star rating. And please hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Please follow and stay connected at wendybazilian.com. And don't forget to share with your friends. Your support helps us grow and bring you more great content. Until next time, find some simple opportunities to optimize those 1000 waking minutes each day.
I'm saying yes to better days, yes, I'm all